London, 1987. The city had seen its fair share of crime, but nothing could prepare it for what was about to unfold. Imagine a bustling afternoon at the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center, a place renowned for its impenetrable vaults, where people entrusted their most valuable possessions. Jewelry, cash, rare collectibles, all safeguarded behind steel walls, under layers of security that were supposed to be invincible. Or so everyone thought. But on July 12, 1987, that illusion of safety shattered. A man walked in, charismatic, confident, with the air of a wealthy customer. No one suspected that he wasn't just an ordinary client, but rather someone with a dangerous plan. He posed as an affluent Arab sheikh, but underneath that guise was Valerio Vice, an infamous criminal with an audacious goal. What started as a seemingly normal day would soon spiral into one of the most notorious heists the world had ever seen. Valerio Vice was not your typical criminal. Born in Italy, he grew up chasing a life that went far beyond the mundane. His ambitions were greater, and so was his disregard for the law. By the time he had set his sights on London, Vice was already notorious in Italy, wanted for over 50 armed robberies. But to him, the thrill wasn't in just the money. It was in the audacity, the glamour, the adrenaline rush of pulling off something no one else dared. He thrived on the risk, and the more impossible the task seemed, the more it attracted him. And this was going to be his masterpiece. With the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center in his sights, Vice concocted a plan so bold that it would require the cooperation of people on the inside, split-second timing, and nerves of steel. On that fateful July afternoon, Vice entered the deposit center under the pretense of wanting to rent a safety box. He chatted casually with the staff, who had no reason to suspect that anything was amiss. It was all part of his strategy: gain trust, blend in, and strike when no one expected it. Once inside the vault, everything changed. Vicky and his accomplice drew their weapons. Within seconds, the unsuspecting staff members found themselves tied up, and a closed sign was hung at the front door to avoid any unwanted visitors. The so-called Impenetrable vault had just become a playground for Vice and his team. They worked efficiently, cracking open box after box, uncovering millions in cash, jewelry, and valuables. The amount stolen would later be estimated at over $97 million, making it one of the largest heists in history. The heist was meticulously planned. Vici had studied the deposit center for weeks, learning the routines, understanding the layout, and identifying weaknesses in the security. He knew that timing was crucial. He needed to strike at a moment when the staff would be least prepared, and he needed to do it without drawing attention. He recruited accomplices who were as fearless as he was, individuals who understood the risks and were willing to take them. Every detail was accounted for, from the tools they would use to the disguises they would wear. But how did Valerio Vice, a man with no fixed address, a man already on the radar of law enforcement, manage to pull this off? How did he bypass the high-tech security measures, and why did he think he could get away with it? Vice's confidence came not only from his careful planning, but also from his belief that he was untouchable. He had evaded capture before, and he believed he could do it again. He was driven by an insatiable desire for recognition, a need to prove that he was smarter, bolder, and more daring than anyone else. These questions linger, and the answers lie in the story of Vice's life, a life that defied convention, a life driven by thrill, risk, and a constant hunger for more. His journey to that fateful day at the Knightsbridge Vault is one filled with daring exploits, charismatic deception, and a surprising vulnerability that would ultimately lead to his downfall. Vice was not just a criminal, he was a complex character, a man who sought excitement in a world that often felt mundane, a man who found purpose in the chaos he created. But before we dive deeper into Valerio Vice's past, let me ask you, what would drive a man to risk everything for one audacious heist? Was it greed, thrill, or something more profound? An insatiable need to be remembered? The answers, as you will soon see, are as complex as the man himself. Vice's story is not just about the crime, it's about the man behind it, the motivations, the dreams, and the inevitable consequences of a life lived on the edge. Stay tuned as we unravel the story of Valerio Vice, the mastermind behind the Knightsbridge security deposit robbery, a heist that proved even the most secure vaults are vulnerable when faced with a man who fears nothing. The heist was just the beginning, but the real story lies in what came before and what would come after. A tale of ambition, recklessness, and the pursuit of a legacy that would never be forgotten. Before that fateful day in July 1987, there was a man whose life seemed to be a perfect blend of charm, recklessness, and crime. Valerio Vici. To understand the magnitude of the Knightsbridge heist, one must understand the person behind it. Who was this man who orchestrated a robbery so audacious that it stunned an entire city? Who was Valerio Vici, and how did he come to choose London as the target for his ultimate crime? Valerio Vici was born in 1955 in Italy, a country that would bear witness to his early life of crime. Growing up in the picturesque town of Sulmona, Vici's upbringing was anything but ordinary. He craved excitement, adventure, and a life of grandeur that his surroundings could never offer. By the time he was in his early 20s, Vici had already turned to a life of crime, and not just any crime. He was interested in the thrill of armed robbery. The louder the sirens, the more dangerous the heist, the greater his satisfaction. He was, by all accounts, addicted to the adrenaline rush that came with each criminal endeavor. Over the years, Vici built a reputation across Italy. He carried out over 50 armed robberies, each one more audacious than the last. By the time the law caught up to him, Vici decided that Italy was no longer a safe playground for his exploits. The authorities were closing in, and he needed a new stage. It was this quest for a fresh start, coupled with an irresistible desire for one last grand score that brought Vici to London, a city with its own kind of elegance and, for Vici, its own vulnerabilities. In London, Vici's life was a mix of luxury and deceit. He presented himself as a wealthy businessman, a persona that allowed him to move effortlessly among the city's elite. He frequented high-end establishments, mingled with influential people, and lived a life that seemed to embody success. But behind the tailored suits and expensive watches was a man whose mind never strayed far from his criminal ambitions. For Vici, London's affluence represented an opportunity. It wasn't long before he set his sights on the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center, a target that promised riches beyond anything he had stolen before. But even for a man as experienced as Vici, pulling off a heist of this magnitude would require more than just skill. It would require inside help, someone who could provide him with access to the fortress-like vaults of Knightsbridge. This is where Parvez Latif came into the picture. Parvez Latif was the managing director of the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center. On the surface, he seemed to be a man in control, managing one of the most secure deposit centers in London. But beneath that veneer of professionalism, Latif was struggling. He was heavily in debt, weighed down by financial burdens that he couldn't shake off. To make matters worse, Latif was a cocaine user, and his addiction only deepened his vulnerabilities. He was a man in desperate need of money, and desperate men are often willing to make dangerous choices. Vici, with his sharp instincts and keen understanding of human weaknesses, quickly identified Latif's vulnerabilities. He saw in Latif not just a means to an end, but a critical asset, someone who could open doors that would otherwise remain locked. Vici befriended Latif, drawing him into his world of luxury and false promises. He offered Latif a way out of his financial troubles, a chance to clear his debts and regain control of his life. All Latif had to do was help Vici gain access to the deposit center. It was a tempting offer, and one that Latif ultimately couldn't refuse. With Latif on his side, Vici had everything he needed, a vulnerable insider who could grant him access and the knowledge of when and how to strike. Together, they began to lay the groundwork for the heist. Vici meticulously planned every detail, from the timing of the robbery to the exact steps they would take once inside the vault. He knew that success would depend on precision, on the element of surprise, and on the trust he had managed to build with Latif. For Vici, this wasn't just about the money. It was about proving himself, about showing that he could outsmart the system, that he could turn even the most secure vault into his own playground. He thrived on the thrill of the challenge, the high stakes and the sense of invincibility that came with outwitting the authorities. And with Latif by his side, he was confident that he could do just that. But what drove Parvez Latif to betray the very institution he was supposed to protect? Was it purely the weight of his debts, or was it the allure of quick money and a chance to start over? And how did Viche, a man wanted for dozens of armed robberies, manage to keep his true identity hidden from those around him? These questions linger as we dive deeper into the story of Valerio Viche and his journey to that fateful day at the Knightsbridge vault. The pieces were in place, the plan was set, and the stage was ready for one of the most infamous heists in history. But the stakes were higher than anyone could have imagined, and the consequences of what was about to happen would ripple far beyond the walls of the deposit center. As the day of the heist approached, the pressure mounted. Viche knew that this was his moment, his chance to prove that he could pull off the impossible. The tension was palpable, the risks enormous, but the potential reward was beyond comprehension. It was a dangerous game, and Viche was all in. He was about to make history, for better or for worse. Stay with us as we unravel the intricate web of deceit, desperation, and ambition that led to the Knightsbridge security deposit robbery. A heist that was as much about human weakness as it was about criminal skill. The stage was set, the plan was in motion, and all that remained was execution. Valerio Viche had meticulously orchestrated every detail, and now it was time to put everything on the line. July 12, 1987, was a day that would forever be etched into the history of audacious crimes. But it didn't start with a bang. Instead, it began with a calm, calculated entry. Viche, accompanied by an accomplice, walked into the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center, blending in with the polished clientele who frequented the high-security establishment. To anyone watching, they appeared like ordinary men, a wealthy Arab sheikh and his associate, ready to rent a safe deposit box. Their attire, demeanor, and the air of authority they carried all served a single purpose: to lower the guard of those around them. Once inside the vault, the atmosphere shifted. The men moved with precision, as if following an invisible script written weeks in advance. As they entered the private room, the heist began to unfold. In an instant, they drew handguns, their voices now firm and commanding. They overpowered the manager and the security guards, subduing them with threats and binding them. The closed sign that they promptly placed on the door wasn't just practical. It was a symbol of how, in that moment, they had seized control. For the next few hours, the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center would belong to them. With the doors effectively sealed off from the public, Viche allowed more of his accomplices to enter the building. They moved quickly but systematically, breaking into safe deposit boxes one by one. Cash, jewelry, bonds, anything of value they could find was fair game. Viche knew that within these vaults lay fortunes, and he was determined to extract every ounce of it. But this was no ordinary bank robbery. Viche was stealing not only money but also the sense of invincibility that had surrounded one of London's most secure establishments. For the people who owned these boxes, the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center had been a fortress, a place where their treasures could be kept safe from the outside world. In just a few hours, Viche shattered that illusion. The estimated take was £60 million, approximately $97 million in cash, jewelry, and other priceless valuables. The figures were staggering, making this one of the largest heists in British history. The calm, methodical manner in which Viche and his crew carried out the heist gave it an almost surreal quality. The alarms didn't blare. There was no chaotic scramble. Instead, it was a slow, relentless ransacking, one that seemed to mock the very concept of security. Despite the presence of multiple layers of defense, Valerio Viche had managed to find a way in, to bypass it all with such ease that it seemed almost unbelievable. The staff, tied up and terrified, could do nothing but watch as the vault was emptied. Each moment stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Valerio Viche's demeanor throughout remained composed. For him, this was the culmination of all his experiences, all his heists. This was the masterpiece. Word of the heist spread like wildfire. By the time the authorities were alerted, Viche and his accomplices had vanished, leaving behind chaos and disbelief. How could such a high-security facility, one designed to be impenetrable, be brought to its knees in broad daylight? It wasn't long before the media picked up on the story, branding it the Lavender Hill Mob Heist, though this was no fiction. This was real, and it had left a scar on London's reputation. For Valerio Vice, this was a triumph, a high that even his long list of previous crimes hadn't been able to match. He had taken on one of the most secure vaults in London, and he had won. But what he didn't know was that this victory would come at a cost he wasn't yet ready to pay. The public reaction was one of astonishment, a mix of outrage and admiration. The audacity, the cunning, and the sheer brazenness of the act left the world stunned. The heist was a significant turning point, not just for Vai, but also for law enforcement and the banking industry as a whole. The world had watched as one of the most secure institutions had been infiltrated with almost surgical precision. It raised questions about just how secure the valuables of the wealthy truly were. For many, it shattered the trust in high-security facilities, leading to a wave of panic among those who had believed their treasures to be safe behind those thick vault doors. Vicky and his crew seemed to have every step mapped out. They had cut the phone lines, ensuring that there would be no way for an alarm to be raised while they were inside. They worked in a coordinated manner, and the way they communicated, using hand signals and whispers, showed just how rehearsed this entire operation was. It was almost as if they had practiced every move, every word, every look. They knew where to go, which boxes to target, and how much time they had to execute the entire operation. It wasn't just about the money for Vici. It was about the thrill, the adrenaline that came from doing something that most people wouldn't even dare to dream of. For him, every successful break-in was a testament to his abilities, a way of proving himself against the system that sought to contain people like him. And the Knightsbridge heist was the crown jewel, a challenge he had taken on and conquered. But this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. The aftermath of the heist would set off a chain of events that neither Vici nor his accomplices could have anticipated. They had the money, but they were far from free. The law had been mocked, and the authorities were determined to restore their pride. As the investigation began, a manhunt was launched, and it was only a matter of time before the noose started tightening around Vici. What did it feel like to walk out of that vault knowing you had just pulled off one of the biggest heists in history? Did Vici believe he could outrun the consequences forever, or was he simply savoring the thrill while it lasted? Stay with us as we explore the dramatic pursuit that followed, an international manhunt, desperate escapes, and the inevitable clash between a criminal mastermind and the forces determined to bring him to justice. It was as if fate had begun weaving a tangled web around Valerio Vice, tightening with every passing day. The heist might have been brilliant, the execution seemingly flawless, but even the most daring plans can unravel from a single misstep. And in Vicky's case, the loose thread came in the form of a bloody fingerprint, a single, almost invisible mark, left behind in the midst of the frenzy. This trace, seemingly insignificant, became the undoing of one of the most notorious heists London had ever seen. The fingerprint was a clue, an echo of Vici's presence that spoke louder than any alibi he could conjure. The authorities, now driven by a sense of urgency and determination to restore the honor of their broken security systems, seized upon it. The fingerprint had a story to tell, and it led them straight to the man who had dared to challenge London's most fortified vault. For Vici, life after the heist was a high-wire act. He had the spoils of his crime, but the specter of pursuit loomed over him like an ever-present shadow. He fled across borders, slipping into the vibrant chaos of Latin America, a continent where law and disorder danced a precarious tango. There he believed he could disappear into the anonymity offered by distant lands, where stories of riches and rebellion were commonplace. But the hunt had already begun. The British authorities, relentless and unyielding, were not about to let this audacious thief slip through their grasp. They were meticulous, patient, and calculated. Surveillance operations were set up, wiretaps were employed, and slowly but surely the noose tightened. August 12, 1987 marked the beginning of the end for Vici's freedom. In coordinated raids across London, several of his accomplices were taken down one by one, as if the puzzle pieces were being put into place. Each arrest bringing the authorities one step closer to the enigmatic mastermind. Valerio Vice might have been miles away, But he was not out of reach. He reveled in his perceived safety, believing that distance had severed the connection between him and the chaos he had left behind. But his attachment to a symbol of his success, his beloved Ferrari Testarossa, would become his Achilles heel. The bright red sports car, a gleaming testament to his wealth and audacity, was more than just a vehicle. It was a statement, a trophy of his triumph over the system he had defied. It was this attachment that betrayed him. Despite his self-imposed exile in Latin America, Vice made the fateful decision to return to England to retrieve his Ferrari. Perhaps he believed he could outsmart the authorities once more, that he could slip in and out unnoticed, reclaiming his prize without consequence. But the law was waiting, like a predator lying in ambush. The moment he set foot back in England, the net closed in. His arrest was swift and decisive. There was no grand chase, no spectacular showdown, just the crushing realization that the game was over. As the cuffs tightened around his wrists, the weight of his actions seemed to settle in. The audacious mastermind, who had walked confidently into the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center, who had tied up staff and looted millions, now found himself captured, a fugitive brought to justice by his own hubris. The once proud and confident Vique was now just another criminal caught in the act, his illusion of invincibility shattered. The red Ferrari, which had symbolized his power and freedom, now stood as a monument to his downfall, a stark reminder that even the most cunning plans can crumble when arrogance blinds judgment. The irony was almost poetic. The very thing that had brought him joy became the instrument of his undoing. The media had a field day. Headlines splashed across newspapers painted the story of a daring heist, a fugitive on the run, and a dramatic capture. The public watched with bated breath as the saga of Valerio Vice, the man who had dared to defy London's impenetrable fortress, came to an end. The authorities finally had their man, and the world looked on as the curtain began to fall on one of the most thrilling chapters in the annals of crime. But was it truly over for Vici? Or was this just another twist in the life of a man who thrived on danger, who lived for the thrill of the impossible? The arrest may have marked the end of his freedom, but the legend of the Knightsbridge heist, and the man who pulled it off, was far from forgotten. The capture of Valerio Vice was more than just the apprehension of a criminal. It was the culmination of a relentless pursuit, a battle of wits between a cunning mastermind and a determined force of justice. It was a testament to the fact that no matter how clever or audacious the plan, crime often carries with it the seeds of its own destruction. Vice's need for recognition, his desire to revel in the spoils of his success, was what ultimately led to his capture. The world watched as the story unfolded, captivated by the rise and fall of a man who had dared to dream beyond the boundaries of the law. Stay with us as we explore the aftermath of Valerio Vice's arrest, the trial, the sentencing, and the legacy of a heist that shook the world. The audacious heist had ended, and the mastermind Valerio Vice had finally been captured. But even as he faced justice, Vice's story was far from over. In 1989, he stood before the court, the weight of his actions fully upon him. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison for his role in the Knightsbridge security deposit robbery. For many, this marked the end of a daring chapter in London's criminal history. But for Vicky, the narrative still held unexpected twists and turns that no one could have foreseen. As the years wore on, Vicci's restless spirit seemed undiminished by incarceration. The once feared criminal now faced the monotonous reality of prison life. In 1992, just 3 years into his sentence, he was extradited to Italy to serve the remainder of his time closer to home. The Italian authorities placed him in an open jail in Pescara, a far cry from the cold stone walls and iron bars of a traditional penitentiary. Here, Vique was allowed certain freedoms, privileges that many inmates could only dream of. It was as if the notorious thief had managed to negotiate with fate itself, continuing to live on his own terms, even behind bars. With a keen mind and an irrepressible entrepreneurial spirit, Vice found a way to make himself useful, even in captivity. He began running a translation company, using his linguistic skills to bridge barriers, a sharp contrast to his previous life of breaking vaults and bypassing security systems. To the outside world, it might have seemed as though Vici was turning over a new leaf, finding a semblance of redemption in the quiet life of business. He managed to carve out a niche for himself, even amidst the confines of the prison system, and some saw it as a sign of reform. But for a man like Valerio Vici, the thrill of the ordinary was never enough. The fire that had fueled his reckless pursuit still burned brightly, hidden beneath the surface, always waiting for the next opportunity to ignite. On April 19, 2000, fate presented Vici with another opportunity to flirt with danger. During a day release from prison, a privilege granted to those inmates deemed low risk, Vici found himself with a taste of freedom. But freedom was intoxicating, a reminder of the life he once led, a life filled with adrenaline, risk, and power. It was on this fateful day that Vici's past and present collided in the most dramatic of ways, leading to a final confrontation that no one could have anticipated. What exactly happened during those hours of temporary liberty remained shrouded in a haze of speculation, rumors, and fragmented reports. What we do know is that Vici, ever the risk-taker, became involved in a gunfight with police. Was it a chance encounter? Was there an escape attempt brewing in his mind? Or was it simply the inevitable manifestation of a man who had always danced on the edge of chaos? The reasons remain elusive, but the outcome was tragically definitive, as the man who had lived by the thrill of the chase now found himself in the ultimate showdown. Shots rang out, a chaotic exchange of gunfire that seemed almost cinematic in its intensity. The once untouchable Valerio Vici, who had walked fearlessly into the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center, was now facing the very embodiment of the law, guns drawn, the stakes higher than ever. The sound of bullets echoed through the air, each one carrying the weight of the past. The heist, the betrayal, the defiance. It was as if the culmination of his life's choices had led him to this exact moment, and there was no turning back. In the aftermath, Vici lay motionless, the fight finally drained from his body. It was a dramatic, almost poetic end to a life defined by rebellion and risk. Valerio Vici, the man who had dared to rob one of London's most secure vaults, met his end not in a courtroom or behind bars, but in a flurry of gunfire on a day that was meant to symbolize a glimpse of hope and freedom. His death marked the closing chapter of a story that had captivated the public, a tale of audacity, greed, and the ultimate price of living on the edge. For the authorities, it was the end of a saga that had haunted them for over a decade. The thief who had outsmarted security systems, who had defied the law at every turn, was finally gone. There would be no more escapes, no more heists, no more headlines of his daring exploits. But for the public, the legend of Valerio Vici lived on, a story of a man who refused to conform, who lived and died by his own rules, even when those rules led to his tragic demise. The image of the infamous thief lying lifeless, his final act ending in violence, became a haunting reminder of the dangers that come with a life driven by defiance. In the end, Vici's life was a testament to the allure of the forbidden, a reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes come with consequences that cannot be outrun. The Knightsbridge heist may have made him infamous, but it was his unyielding spirit, his defiance in the face of authority that made Valerio Vici a figure that would not soon be forgotten. The audacity of his crimes, the charisma he exuded, and the inevitability of his downfall painted a portrait of a man whose legend would be told and retold for years to come. And so as we close this chapter, we are left to wonder, was Vici a man driven by greed, or was he simply unable to resist the thrill of the impossible? Was he a villain or a tragic figure caught in the web of his own making? His story, full of daring highs and tragic lows, serves as a powerful reminder of the fine line between brilliance and recklessness. The legend of Valerio Vici may have ended in a blaze of gunfire, but the echoes of his audacity continue to resonate, challenging us to consider the true cost of living without limits. The world may have moved on, but the story of Valerio Vici remains, a cautionary tale of ambition, hubris, and the fatal allure of a life lived beyond the bounds of the ordinary. The echoes of the Knightsbridge security deposit robbery reverberated far beyond the streets of London, leaving an indelible mark on the world of crime and security. Decades later, the heist remains one of the largest and most audacious bank robberies in history, a case study of both criminal ingenuity and systemic vulnerabilities. It wasn't merely the staggering sum stolen that shocked the world, but the sheer ease with which Valerio Vice and his accomplices breached the supposedly impenetrable vault. In the annals of history, the heist stands as a sobering reminder of the human element in security, the element that can be influenced, coerced, or simply outwitted. Despite multiple arrests and years of investigation, a significant portion of the stolen valuables was never recovered. Jewelry, cash, and priceless heirlooms. Their fate became an enduring mystery, lost to the labyrinthine underworld that deals in whispers, shadows, and secrets. Some say they ended up in private collections. Others speculate they were traded across borders, transformed into silent currency that would never resurface. The heist's mastermind, Valerio Vice, may have paid the ultimate price, but his legend persisted partly because of what was still out there, the treasures that vanished into thin air, never to be seen again. These missing riches became symbols of a successful crime, a lingering mystery that only added to the aura surrounding Vice's audacious raid. The incident laid bare the weaknesses of an era that had yet to truly grapple with the complexities of sophisticated crime. It was a pivotal moment for the security industry, a wake-up call that spurred significant reforms. Vaults were redesigned, procedures overhauled, and the very nature of trust in financial institutions was questioned. People began to understand that security was not just about thick walls and alarm systems. It was about people, their motivations, their vulnerabilities, and the unpredictable ways they could be compromised. The human factor, it turned out, was the most vulnerable link, and it was that very weakness that Vicky and his crew had exploited so effectively. For London, the heist became part of its lore, a tale recounted with awe and disbelief. The Knightsbridge robbery became a cautionary story, a symbol of both criminal ambition and the fragility of the systems designed to protect against it. For those who had lost their valuables, it was a bitter reminder of how easily the illusion of safety could be shattered. The victims were not just robbed of their possessions, but also of their peace of mind, left with questions that would never be fully answered. Many of them never saw justice served in full, and the emotional scars of that betrayal lingered long after the physical losses had been tallied. The impact was felt not only by those who lost their valuables, but by a wider audience who began to question the very institutions they had trusted with their most cherished assets. As time passed, the Knightsbridge heist turned into more than just a story of crime. It became a symbol of the daring nature of human ambition. Valerio Vice's name became synonymous with a breed of criminal that operated outside the rules, motivated not just by greed, but by the thrill of conquering the impossible. His story, complete with triumphs, betrayals, and a tragic end, has continued to inspire books, documentaries, and whispered conversations among those fascinated by the audacity of the human spirit. In these retellings, Vici is often portrayed as a figure of complex motivations, part villain, part anti-hero, someone who dared to challenge the limits imposed by society regardless of the consequences. His exploits, while undoubtedly criminal, were also a testament to his unique skill set, his charisma, and his relentless pursuit of what he believed to be his right to live on his own terms. And while the Knightsbridge vault may have long been sealed and the physical scars of the heist repaired, the legacy of that day in 1987 lingers. It's a reminder that even in a world fortified by walls of steel and technology, there will always be those who seek to test the boundaries, those who are willing to risk it all to prove that no lock is unbreakable, no wall impenetrable, and no system infallible. The story of Valerio Vice and the Knightsbridge heist endures as a symbol of both human brilliance and folly, a cautionary tale that illustrates how even the best-laid defenses can crumble under the weight of relentless ambition. It serves as a powerful reminder that ingenuity, for all its potential for greatness, can also lead to devastating outcomes when channeled in the wrong direction. The aftermath of the heist also sparked debates about justice, morality, and the thin line between desperation and recklessness. Many saw Vice as a cautionary tale, a man whose genius and audacity could have been channeled into more constructive pursuits, but who instead chose a path that ultimately led to his downfall. His death in a hail of gunfire was the inevitable consequence of a life lived on the edge, a reminder that the high of defiance often comes with an unforgiving cost. The Knightsbridge heist may be history, but its lessons resonate to this day, urging caution, vigilance, and perhaps a deeper understanding of the human need to push boundaries, for better or for worse. The heist also left a legacy of inspiration for those interested in the darker side of human behavior. Authors, filmmakers, and storytellers who saw in Vicey's actions a narrative rich with tension, danger, and a touch of tragic heroism. His life story has been dissected and analyzed, with some painting him as a cold-blooded criminal, while others see a man trapped by his own ambitions, a modern-day pirate seeking freedom from societal constraints. The legend of Vicey refuses to die because it speaks to the duality present in all of us, the ability to create or destroy, to protect or plunder, to obey the rules or to defy them. The Knightsbridge heist serves as a timeless example of what can happen when preparation meets opportunity, and when the allure of wealth and notoriety surpasses the fear of consequence. As financial institutions continue to bolster their security measures, and as technology becomes more advanced, the ghost of Valerio Vicey lingers as a stark reminder that the most formidable walls can still be brought down by those bold enough to try. And perhaps that is the most enduring lesson of all, that ambition, unchecked and undeterred, will forever seek the cracks in our strongest defenses, testing the boundaries we so carefully construct to keep ourselves and our treasures safe.